Welcome to Carl DeGregorio's Desk Session 77. There's a good number, nice round number. What happened in 77 that we can think of right off the dome in the 1900s? You know, that's how it's being transitioned into late 1900s. And so to spin things positively about my generation or when I was born and what you can do about when you were born is very nothing much. And so to sort of be contained or have a lifespan straddle centuries and straddle millennia, that's just a fortunate happenstance. And so 77, when I say 77 and we're missing the 19, I am assuming people go that route and they don't. So, but in the year 1977, I think that's the first Star Wars, if I'm not mistaken. That's not my jam. That is not really my jam, although I loved it as a kid and I love the action figures. It didn't keep, I have seen 0% of the new ones. And the Mandalorian, that stuff, it's not, I'm not a hater. it just doesn't, I'm just not into that stuff. And yeah, what else? 77 was also, there are myriad documentaries about 77 being, I think that was a year 76, 77, 78. There was a Yankees won the series, and I think in 77. And there's been all these documentaries about punk rock and hip hop kind of coming to the surface. This is definitely East Coast centric, referring to the Summer of Sam was 77, I'm pretty sure. And what was going on in the New York City, there was a blackout, things like that. And how that leads us into this week, I don't know. I have a lot going on up top, and I'm sure we all do. And a lot of clues from my writing and my acting life are starting to maybe present, some kind of breadcrumb in a reverse order, if you will. And how that would lead me to stay on track, stay upbeat, kind of not fall back into old ways, and understand that fence building is very tedious, but the posts is where you're where you're able to track progress with posts and fence posts, and also maybe in terms of looking back on these desk sessions. I used to flip through pages of the journals. I haven't done it in many years, but I used to flip back over pages of the journals, and that wasn't very helpful because, like I've said many times, that's not really writing for me. That is, if you will, not even indulge me, but if I will be honest with you, it's self-help. It's sort of administering self-therapy, and in many cases it's prayer. And that's the that helped me understand soliloquies in Shakespeare. And I've told you that on my own time, on my own accord, and of my own volition, although it was also being taught in school, but I got very obsessed with Shakespeare on my own time because of my good fortune to have studied with Patrick Stewart, that one you're thinking about. I got to study with him, and I got to see Shakespeare for what it is, and that. But I bring that up. Why? Because some of these things I've been noticing in old biographies and old journals, and what I would recommend for anybody, I think you can be very, how do I put it? Right. Soliloquies. You have to figure out who you're talking to. Oftentimes you're talking to the audience, or and I think there's a way to delineate judging by the text, or there's some clues, or sometimes I think they're fairly obvious, but they're actually a journal. The question always being in those soliloquies in your journal, who do you think you're talking to? Right? Now, if you are writing a journal and I think that's individual to the person, right? I don't know, and I'm sure the least interesting thing, and even as an avid Springsteen fan, those box sets he puts together where they have a recreated notebook, I don't find them as fascinating as others might. Going through Thomas Jefferson's journals, like some of that stuff, that's for somebody else to sift through and get the good stuff out. And of course, they wrote at a higher level, but I think in my case, they would find my journals repetitive. And certainly I'm no Thomas Jefferson for a lot of good reasons and a lot of falling short reasons, but I can only speak for myself. But I think other people are meticulous in keeping facts of the day, keeping how they spent their day. I think that is a form of journaling. Some people do it on a freebie calendar. I keep a day planner, which is a diary and an appointment book. People are doing it on their computers now. And that data is now digitized, and you can say, oh, that's when we went to the PTA meeting. That's when we had to join the kids up for soccer. All that stuff, that's a form of journaling. And then for me, it has the date and the year and all that stuff. But by and large, it's sort of like maybe a purging of self-pity, or a purging of fear, or a purging of heartbreak. And then sometimes, and more rarely, I guess, as I think about it, it would be a purging of posterity, where I was trying to savor a moment by writing about it in luxurious detail. And that was the lesser of the entries. And that's an indicator to sort of an inner life that needed some help. And that's where I'm at today, why would I spend my time in my journal, which is my time, my inner thoughts? And I think I'm writing to the man upstairs. And so when Hamlet says to be or not to be, who is he talking to? He happens to be witnessed by an audience, but many of the soliloquies are what's going on the inside of the character, what's going on in his head, i.e. a voiceover in a film. And without the benefit of electricity and celluloid and filming and now AI, Shakespeare had to give an interiority to the character so the audience could track not only the events on stage, but they could track what's going on inside the character. But as you notice, Hamlet gets soliloquies, others do not. So big chunks of speech, like the Queen Mab speech in Romeo and Juliet by Mercutio, is not a soliloquy. It's just a big, long speech because he is talking to his fellow players. But the soliloquies in Hamlet are to the audience, and certainly other characters in different plays, similarly the Richard III, things like that. I am getting pedantic, and I also am presenting as I know more than I do, but so that's where I'm at with journal keeping. Journal keeping vlogging is now replacing that. Now, would I go back over these and watch myself? I don't know. It's been mentioned to me that regardless of the size of audience that I am gathering, that what a tool for posterity this will ultimately be. And that is of interest in a way. And the idea of these journals, some of which now are in plastic bins in my storage unit, they're not going to be discovered. They are being kept by me for maybe feeling of accomplishment, because one thing also, similar to making your bed, similar to getting to the gym, similar to saying positive affirmations, praying, similar to all that, the journal keeping is a way to keep a deal with yourself that something has been done today. And that would also probably be even more true for the journal keeper who's kind of keeping a creative journal. I think sometimes people can be commissioned to keep a journal. So what would be a travel log? Or Anthony Bourdain basically was journaling journal, and I guess that's where journalist comes from, journaling about his travels, but they would call that a travel log. But when you're literally just trying to navigate your ups and downs emotionally, reading them back can not always be of much use. And certainly somebody else reading them might, would have to be near obsessed with the subject to want to dig into that stuff. And that's where, your PhD candidates, your biographers, people like that will have that obsessive nature, but it's usually about a historical figure. And I'm of the mind that as far as creativity is concerned and as far as storytelling is concerned, that I'm trying to say and believe, maybe because of the aspirations I still hold similar to my youth, I find that everything and the banal is fascinating, and I'm often turned off by stories, movies mostly, that have to throw a massive, another academic term, deus ex machina, onto it, or science fiction, or the science fiction I like, or the post-apocalyptic stuff I liked was something like Session77, which unfortunately had the timing of coming out during the pandemic, almost. And it was about a pandemic that wiped out the world. And then the people who did survive, they, which appealed to me, like there was a troupe of Shakespeare people who actually knew the plays by heart and traveled around in a circle on a wheel following the sun or following the seasons. And they would do different plays that they all had kind of committed to memory. And that appealed to me. But something like the Fear of the Walking Dead, I never sat through an episode of that, even though it's got a ton of great actors on it. The zombie thing, just didn't appeal. But I do like that they are anti-tech, but they are science fiction, if you know what I'm saying. So like the science fiction is what created these zombies. But the low tech is that, basically post-apocalyptic means that the infrastructure is gone, the grid is down. We're back to needing to power what we have left with the gas. That's Mad Max is literally about running out of gas. You know what I'm saying? So I do appreciate that kind of fiction. But with the storytelling, and I spoke about it last week about, other than vanity and self-regard, a lot of what I think hopefully can connect with what I do is the universality of the locality, and that each person, we've heard that phrase, we contain multitudes. And I believe that. And so the journal for me is, like I said, very handy in very rare cases. And when I am struggling, I suppose, I have often not had the will to, sit with myself enough to keep up. And so even in my youth, you'll see these huge gaps of time. Or I got busy, and maybe that's a good thing. But the other flip side of it, when it's bad, when good things were happening, they were coming at such a pace and life was so exciting that I didn't check in. And I think that's part of the discipline of anything, is you go when you're up and you go when you're down. I know that's true in sort of therapeutic circles. Like you don't, if you go till you feel better and then you stop going, then yeah, I suppose that if you're going for a specific reason, like a job search or something like that, and that's more coaching than therapy, but you go when it's going well and when it's going poorly, because those are happenstances along the roadmap. But one thing I will, and getting a glimpse, my play, I don't think I'm not spoiler alerting, but my play, The Return of Otis Redding, it is a bit of it was an opportunistic, I was opportunistic. I was in the middle of writing it when, and I put it in the description, so it's not a spoiler alert, but I was in the middle of writing it. I had these stories kind of compiled. I knew where I was going with it. I knew what I was writing about, but it was a random act of cleaning out closets and cupboards and doing a deep clean and finding an old picture, which is a common, that sounds like the start of either a horror movie or a romance. But I did discover a photo and a thank you card, and pardon me, I say that the memory jarred from that photo, kind of spawned the writing, and that's a little bit of a poetic license or fiction, if you will, even if it's a but everything is modulated or modular, and you can edit and things, and so you can change, if you can change the order of the scenes, because I write in my scenes and they're really just stories, but if they're modular, then as you write and you complete, and there'll be probably inserts and edits on the way to producing it. But the impact of seeing a photo, seeing a thank you card, that in the description to sell it as the problem with one-man shows is to sell solo performances as something other than stand-up or something other than spoken word, or other than portraying a public, historical figure, is how do you make it a living moment for the audience to have some kind of feeling of drama, feeling of discovery in the unfolding of the stories being told, so that it's not strictly a monologue. And by saying that the photo jars a memory that led to the impetus of kind of finishing this play, it did give me a big frame. It gave me the ending, let's say. And that's valid. Now, if it was a biopic, or if you were being held to journalistic standards, and who's to say what I was really feeling? I'm telling you now, I'm putting you behind the scenes of why this came to pass. When I had my reading, because I put it in the synopsis that The Return of Otis Redding was a man discovers an old photo which jars a memory, and I speak of that in the description of the play. And I either made the mistake or I made the smart decision to read the log line to the crowd, the audience of a few who were going to help me sort of do this developmental read. I read the log line before I read the play, and then I read the play. One of the comments was, from all the way back to the synopsis, the comment was, why don't you put the discovery of that photo on stage? Which is actually a very interesting idea, to sort of dramatize it. But then I'm thinking that while it's a great and very interesting idea, I don't know. But what it does help me understand is, and as you whittle down, and as you kind of make a reduction rather than a broth, as you intensify the flavor or the drama or the good writing, whatever it is, that process of pouring things through a sieve, that either means the synopsis is a little bit off track, or that's a good point he makes, or I can take it all with a grain of salt and move forward as I plan, which is usually how people take feedback, which is why it is a sort of dubious process to elicit feedback, because if you're not willing to take it, or, I'm putting that in the hopper, and it isn't a bad idea. But they can also elucidate other ways to get at what that person's saying. There's a kernel like, yes, you're making some sense, because that would make it, you could set it in an attic. If it's about discovering a photo in storage, you could make it, and then it makes you start to think about the set. Could you put it in a storage unit? Could the action of the one-man show be to unlock and pull up the door to your storage unit and do this one-man show like a soliloquy as you go through your stuff? That's an interesting idea. I think I have to make it as lo-fi as I possibly can and create a moment of in-the-moment theater. And some of the great things that, and I mentioned this before, and that is the thing that, the human construction of the world as it is that the holy grail of science would be time travel, right? Back to the Future and all that. But literally, it wasn't the flux capacitor. It wasn't the DeLorean. It was the script that made the time travel and the artisans and the director and the writers that made that time travel actually exist for the purposes of the film. And that's another reason why I hang by a limb or by a thread to the idea that art is somehow going to survive these cultural machinations. And I also don't understand the willingness to, headlong into the breach of letting a computer do art. I don't know. I can't stop it. It's making me beside myself, to be honest. And I wonder. And I think what it means is, I think there's a Springsteen line in Jungle Land, a great song called Jungle Land, with that huge sax solo at the end, and it's got strings on it. It's like a big, it's kind of where the pomposity of the Springsteen sound, the wall of sound, like Jungle Land is a typified Phil Spector-esque kind of thing he was going for. Some would say it's pretentious, but I would say it still moves me. And he says at the end, and the poets round here, they don't write nothing at all. They just stand back and let it all be. And I guess I'm pulling that out as a line. That's kind of where I think I'm at with AI. At this point, I think in my heart of hearts that I can write better than AI. I have an idiosyncratic nature to my prose that I would not want to abdicate the writing of things to a machine at this point, Certainly academically that's not true, and certainly the idea that AI can go and do what we used to have to do through a card fucking catalog, that is interesting, and research purposes and what you could send it off to do, sure, that needs to be automated. I was marveled that the library in college had, instead of index cards like we had at the library, it was all in a computer, and then you'd follow where the book was on the shelf. That is being done through fiber optics now, and that is interesting and exciting, and it puts, quote unquote, the world at your fingertips. That is exciting. And so if it then kind of spit out a report on, go find out the best sax solos in rock and roll, that you could see the, like the movie The Net, you could see the little like animation of electronics impulses going through fiber optic cables to go open that door in the research and come back with it and then spit it out. That's great. But a eulogy, a keynote speech, a one-man show, that I gotta believe that I can still do, to my heart and to my experience on the planet, I can do that better than the machine so far. And certainly going all the way back to Star Wars, not that I am, and maybe I'm reverse engineering this. I was fascinated with that movie. I love that movie. But as I got into acting and theater and plays, and I gravitated away from fantastical stories and into more personal, dramatic things that could be done, on stage as well as in front of a camera. I used to joke that, someone would ask me if I saw a movie, and I'd say, is it about police corruption in the 1970s? And then the person would say no. And I'm like, well, then I didn't see it. I wanted to, act in a Sidney Lumet film. And maybe it's because of early exposure, because I used to go with my dad to movies, and he would just sort of stop taking me to kid movies and just take me to, I remember seeing Prince of the City, which is like a 3-hour movie about police corruption in the 70s. And it's it fascinated me, even though I didn't know what the hell was going on, and there wasn't any action. There's a lot of talking. Treat Williams, Jerry Orbach. It was just such a New York movie. So Danny Cello was about this corrupt task force in New York in the 70s. And I remember one line from it is, his wife is saying, why should we be worried? What did he do? And he goes, he carpeted his upstairs just like us. That's what he did. He carpeted his upstairs. cops were, paycheck to paycheck, and then when they needed to do home improvement, then the little pad was what they were able to draw on. And I'm not saying I think that's good, but that's what these guys were going up to jail for, and that's what these guys were risking their careers for, and their souls to some degree. And spoiler alert, it ends on this thing where Danny Cello somehow rats everybody out, and he gets a deal to sort of explain the depths and the machinations of this corruption. And then I guess his sort of punishment is that he's not out on the streets anymore, but he becomes an instructor at the academy. And the last scene is he's in front of a lecture hall and he's about to talk, and some guy raises his hand. He goes, "Are you that Danny Cello that worked at the precinct over there?" And he goes, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, I got nothing to learn from you." And then there's a face where they end on Treat Williams just sort of taking it in, the shame, and they kind of do one of those dissolves where they end on the face of the actor, wondering like, what have I become? What a mess I've made. What I went against every oath, and they either pull in or pull out. And now I know, as I got older, I knew none of this as a little kid, and I think I even saw the movie on Nantucket Island at a place called the Casino, if the memory floods are right. And so Prince of the City. And so when I think the cop wasn't saying, "I don't want to hear what you have to say because you did all this crime." He's saying, "I don't want to hear what you have to say because you ratted out other cops." And so what does that have to do with space fights and X-Wing fighters and R2-D2? It has nothing to do with it. And it's just men, and it's about cops. And so that will always sort of be my preference of things to watch. And so the promise of AI that you can create these worlds and do fantasy and sci-fi, I'm hoping at very maximum it's going to be a category for people who like that stuff. I just don't, and I still like watching people mix it up, because in Prince of the City, it's the prosecutors who are taking all these depositions and stuff, and then cops, take swallow their guns, and like the one prosecutor, there's a scene where he just says, "Never cops. I'm never going after cops again," because of it's such a good and evil, good guys, bad guys. It just, and watching these guys who, what they go through, it just became, too much. So anyway, that's where I'm at on sort of what appeals to me in terms of what I hope to have gone through. And now, one thing about this extemporaneous speech is I probably wouldn't have the energy, the time, the focus to write that memory down. And I'm glad I can put it out here and maybe save it for my own posterity to experience it again. And that again is what Shakespeare did with all stage performing, and what I can do with my show is, for a brief time, I can bring that memory back. My dad is with me in that memory. The being on Nantucket Island, which I haven't been back to, and seeing a movie that maybe even before I used to always say in my fantastical recollection of wanting to be an actor that it was Cuckoo's Nest that made me want to do it. But it could have been me wanting to do it by watching Prince of the City, which isn't even considered one of the better cinémats. But so for that moment, while you're listening, while you're taking a trip through your mind, hearing what I'm saying, we are back there. And so that's what I do. And I'm stealing that, and I'm not describing it as well as this professor on a documentary about movies, when he said that bringing someone back to life with your storytelling, with your art, that is the greatest gift you can give that person, or the best way to honor somebody. And so Shakespeare's doing that when he brings these Hamlet. I'm obsessed with that. There's historical precedence to that story, and so and all the kings that he brings back and all that, and the Montagues and the Capulets, some of that stuff is hodgepodge, mixing things up. And if these were presented today, there would be people on Twitter going, "It didn't really happen like that. It didn't happen like that. There's no," and all the when you do biopics, everybody harps on the fact that they were souped up. And the fact of the matter is, so what, in my opinion? And if you want to do a documentary, you're probably beholden to the facts. But if you're going to do a movie and you find out that, the fight went 11 rounds, but you want to have the 15th round, yeah, that's an inaccuracy. But nobody gave Shakespeare Rotten Tomatoes and things like that. So, and that's where I'm at with that, because the other thing that journaling and sort of startling yourself with things is you understand that things that you forgot, that things that you have now whittled down in memory as a regurgitated fact, may be also inaccurate to the degree, not that so much I find it also either exciting to be corrected, or you find a psychology through the ages, if you will, and I'm not through the ages, but through my ages, you find a psychology that hopefully is a different psychology than where you are today, and hopefully today it's a little bit better than it was, even though you can see the kernels of creativity, aspiration. In reading through these bios, I had to write these bios. That's a thing to learn as a young actor. I would have those prepared before you're asked for them. Write your theater bio, write your back of your book bio, write your website bio. Today, all of these things are required of everybody, and they used to take me by storm, and I've had to write them. Blessedly, I was a young actor who got gigs, and I got to write bios, but I didn't have a standard one, which would have been just easy to, and I would get into trouble with them as far as like what they would say to the world in terms of where I was at, or what they would say to me, and I would put these things out there. For example, in one of these bios, and it might have been as far back as high school, but I basically said that my plan was to, be an actor for my life, and as long as I could live with the poverty. And what the fuck am I, talk about putting out a restrictor plate on your upside. And maybe it was to be self-effacing. I showed it to my buddy, and he said, at that time you were riding high. At that time you were hot shit, or so you thought. And maybe it was a way for you to have this false modesty so people wouldn't think I was a dick. But later for that, that doesn't work in terms of your manifesting, or whatever you might want to call it. But the other thing you notice with the passage of time and getting to look back, if you've archived some stuff, or someone blessed you with some archives, some of this stuff I had duplicates of myself, but my brother was kind enough to send them. But the idea that things that I was fretting, like whether I was going to get into a school, or whether I'd get this, that, or the other, these biographies, or these journal entries, if you will, if you look back over them and you put enough distance between them, you do start to see that maybe you did manifest some of these things. If I go back to always being worried and writing my worry down, which may have been a reinforcement rather than a get over it. I don't know where I'm going to, but I haven't heard back from them. I can't believe I got to do them. That whole worry loop. And then if you skip to 6 months later, it's day one on the set of, or it's day one of rehearsal, so, and those things do happen. And I have to, in my worry and my woe, I have to remember, things are on the way, good and bad. Things are on the way, and I don't know. It's all very heady. Obviously, the whole point of talking to this is to, be extemporaneous. I like that word. I've said that word 1,000 times. Is to be thinking out loud hopefully transmitting some kind of positive endeavor, some kind of life affirming thing, and trying to, if I'm going to put words to it, put pen to paper. I guess it's not to deny, but it's to train on saying positive things, productive things. If you want to take the I hate that woo-woo because I don't use those kind of overused words, but like that woo-woo, people say, I don't want to get too woo or too kumbaya. That's so hack. But New Age, I guess, or spiritual, God forbid, or you don't want to sound like a decorative pillow when you say thinking positive. But the Unabomber had some ideas about technology, but he didn't write about things positively. That's a terrible example, but you have to be careful what you loop and what you put out there. And so when I sit at the desk session and talk, it doesn't have to be positives per se, but I think it does, because I don't want to, if we are a miracle of biology and electricity, and we are the apex predator and the apex mammal on the planet, then I guess my feeling would be to spew bile is a waste of that biological miracle, to spew negativity, to not search for the right word, to not try your best. And I suppose when you're angry, you try your best to decimate with words. And then eventually when you finally, all those things have been exhausted, then you're left with what? But it's interesting. And the other thing about amassing these volumes and volumes of words and things I've written is, if I was working something out in those journals and they could have been helpful to share, you can't share piles and piles of analog pen and ink and pages. And I've been using the same pens for years, and that stuff's cool, and that gets my vibe going and gets me going. But I can't transmit those to anybody because nobody's going to sit and read my journals. So I guess where I'm looking at is purpose, in terms of like, if I can share and maybe be less stingy with my feelings and emotions, and then there's a chance to connect. And that's all we're trying to do, is connect. And that's why I have to believe in art, and I have to believe in the future of endeavor, and try, not very successfully all the time, and try to keep my complete existential dread and fear of another industry, the one that I set out to do, going away because of technology. And to face the fact that, okay, Matthew McConaughey can say we can license ourselves, but I mean, it's impractical for me to do that at this point. They can just steal it, gank it, and it hasn't come to market in the same way it has for Matthew McConaughey. So, every working actor who still hasn't, hit big hears that, and they want to, then we're going to be down to what, 15 actors, and they'll just, it's bleak in its offering, and it didn't have to go that way, except for the fact that people want to control and money, and human beings are sloppy, messy, and biologically demanding, and so it makes a business sense to try to eliminate that. But hopefully, and so that's what I mean when I talk about the poets around here don't want to write nothing. It's time. And I hate to sound like self-serious and stuff, but it is time for me. I'll only speak for me, but it is time for artists to put out better stuff, me included, and try better, because we're competing with the almighty machine that can do it better. And in many cases, except for this part, the ganas, the part, the desire, the want, the drive, the humanity has to be. We have to do better. Put out better stuff so that we wouldn't be entertained by slop, right? That's the thing, because I don't need to see Blade. I don't know if I've ever seen Blade Runner from beginning to end. They could do Blade Runner in, lickety split, and you wouldn't get it. It's a design marvel. And they say it holds up because it was all done, in real effects and stuff like that, and CGI. The only CGI that I relate to and have seen in the theater, I got into the reboot of the Planet of the Apes, where they used technology to bring those apes to life. But it was also the story of rebellion, repression. It was the storytelling that, got me to buy in. So hopefully there is a middle ground where it's a tool and not our master. And so that's a lot. That's a lot this week. This week I appreciate this outlet because I've had a lot on the mind. And so anyway, I thank you. I have to go into my back into my playlist to make sure we know where we're at on the list. I didn't pre-do that because I'm at this eager point to make sure that I jump at it when I get to it, and so I have to check the list. Last week we did Lovers Rock. I don't know if you checked it out. It's a dope song. I'll put Lovers Rock in this description, and then I'll tell you what's going to be on next week's if you're curious and you stuck with it this long. I think we're in the 30 to 40 minute range. But the song is Every Day, which is an album track, not a single, an album track off of Lucy Pearl's only record. Lucy Pearl was a supergroup in the neo-soul kind of late 90s era. It was Dawn Robinson, but who was from En Vogue, and it was spearheaded and the creative force of Raphael Sadiq, who is the sort of leader of Tony, and there are other contributors. I think there's someone from the Fugees on that. And Lucy Pearl put out an album, and they had I Wanna Dance Tonight was the big hit. And this song Every Day is back in the day when you used to spin entire albums, this was, I think, the opening track on the album. Or anyway, it's just a very upbeat song. Again, I've used over the years in my lowest days. I think you remember that song You Gotta Be. I don't know if it's on my list because I haven't checked it out, but You Gotta Be, one of the darker periods of my life was when I had to vacate an apartment in New York, and the only thing that I got to sort of keep was I pulled out this dope ass Iowa mini system stereo. It was like a 4-piece, 2 speakers. It had CD, tuner, double cassette. I recently donated it. I don't even think they wanted it. I think I had to dispose of it, but it was this prized possession that I literally put in a bag and got on a plane with my stereo system rather than clothes, because I just had to have my music with me. And it had this incredible remote control, and you could wake up to a song. And for a dead year, I woke up to You Gotta Be by Des'ree, which is her song about, this is a little embarrassing, but it's her song about staying persistent in the brutal music industry. But it was like I needed that every day to wake up with something positive in my spirit. And the fact that the technology then was like you could wake up to one of your CDs was like, oh, that's incredible. And I think now you can do it with with your alarm on your phone. And so I've always had these songs. One of them, another song I discovered on those like Rhino Records soul compilations that I would buy, was Wake Up Everybody by Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes with Teddy Pendergrass. You Wake Up Everybody, No More Sleeping. That was a very literal get up out of bed, because I've always been a night owl and a nocturnal person, and mornings are tough for me. So I literally had sometimes to jolt myself out of bed with a song, a positive song. And so this song Every Day by Lucy Pearl is one of those upbeat kind of, every day is a brighter day when you come round my way, that kind of thing. And so, again, this falls in line, and I guess maybe you'll start to see a bit of a journey through trying to keep a mood stable or a spirit high this was an encouraging song, mid-tempo, up-tempo R&B. I was, people, the 90s and 2000s and like the sort of golden age of hip hop or whatever. I was definitely, conversant in that stuff to the degree that I, when I was at a club, I knew some of the stuff they were playing, but I'm definitely more on the R&B tip, and 90s R&B is fairly undisputed as the golden age of R&B if you watch any reaction channel. But Lucy Pearl was in that neo soul movement that sort of culminated with Maxwell and D'Angelo, R.I.P. And so, and there were many stories about ego problems, and there weren't always that many supergroups in R&B and bands and stuff like that. But Lucy Pearl was one of them, and I know if you watch the video and you see the comments are going to be like, damn, they only had one, this was my jam, what if on that, and then you find out that maybe the En Vogue singer was, there were just ego clashes, and Raphael Sadiq has forged ahead. He was the music supervisor on Insecure, and his solo stuff is fantastic, and he's a bass player, which is always an interesting departure. He wrote Lady, the sort of radio friendliest of the D'Angelo hits. He wrote You're My Lady. And, to be a composer, but like with bass as your primary instrument, that's interesting. And Vintage Soul is one of his first debut albums. But Lucy Pearl was sort of this bridge between Tony and his solo stuff. And Every Day is the song. So enjoy it. And try to make every day a brighter day. Speak the speech, I pray you, and check out some Shakespeare. I'll get deeper into it. There are some things, because I have peeped the monologue that I was very well versed in. I've looked at it and the text, and it's almost cryptic in terms of having that whoa at a very young age, or having the intense understanding of that text at a young age and how it's rearing its head today. That is the progress I need to make, even still, to not so closely identify with Hamlet. It's a tragedy, by the way. So let's go more with Lucy Pearl. Go out this week and try to make a dream come true, and I don't know, try to get off the sinking ship before the AI iceberg. It's just so I have to really turn up the heat and try to get this show going, and I've been rewriting and adding things and hopefully making it better. So figure out what you got to do this week. Peace, Carl D.